and today I'm going to go over the California Association of Realtors, the residential purchase agreement, and escrow instructions. So I'm going to jump right in because I'm trying to make it as quick as possible. I am going to leave a lot of stuff out, not on purpose, but because of time, because I've recorded this 3 times and they each come out to be about 25 minutes. Who is going to watch a contract video for 25 minutes? So I'm going to give you the overview. Let's get right to it. Okay, disclosure regarding agency. This has to be before the listing agreement and or the purchase contract. Either way, this is where the agent tells you, really bound by law and by civil statute, that we have to act on your best interest, in your best interest. Right here, a fiduciary duty of utmost care, integrity, honesty, and loyalty in dealings with buyers. That means that we have to look for issues if we think there are some, an older home, or for instance, if we know something going on in the neighborhood or we know of past issues with the home, we are required to disclose that. Now, it's really interesting, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, about all the things that we are really supposed to tell you about anything that we know to make sure that we take care of you and we're honest and fair dealing and in good faith. But there's also another side to it. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. But also, please note that while we are in a transaction, I keep all of your information private. I don't blab about you, your financial situation, what you're doing. Generally, in my many years of real estate, all I've done is talked about the house and the environment the house is being sold in, like basically the current market. So keep in mind, not only is it our duty to act in your best interest, it's also our duty to keep all of your information private and confidential. Here is the civil code that outlines all of our duties. Next up, fair housing and discrimination advisory. There's a lot here. This one, I'm again like trying to be super quick here. This is just protected classes that if you feel you've been discriminated against, there are some resources here down below that you can contact to say, hey, I think we were discriminated against. There is a very famous situation that came up, I believe, in Berkeley, where a African American family had their home appraised and felt that because they were African American, that their home was appraised less, and they redecorated their home, had a white person basically pose as them, had another appraisal done, and the value came up. So that's an example of it. Another example of it is it doesn't mean you don't mean to, but you could be sending a letter to the seller and stating everything that's great about you, your jobs, it would have a picture of you and it would tell a lot about you. Well, that might preference a seller towards you or against you, or for another seller, or I'm sorry, another buyer, or against another buyer. So they really, really do not want you to send seller love letters anymore. We still do. I help people craft them, but we try to make them as general as possible. So right here, it's just asking for offering buyer personal information or letters, especially with photos. So, again, unconscious bias. The only other thing about this is that I just stated that we were required to tell you, the buyer, about things that we might know about a certain area. For instance, there's a couple areas in town that they do have crime. They do have higher crime averages than other um, neighborhoods. But right here, if I was not, I would never refuse to show, but if I talked about it, I could get in trouble with steering. And they're saying because racial or religious or ethnic composition of the neighborhood. So again, I would be as general as possible, say blame it on crime and not state who I think is actually doing that crime. But this is also just the tightrope we walk to make sure that we get you the right information, yet we stay within fair housing laws. So that should do it for that. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. This I'm going to pass up. This is just talking about dual agency. Really, what you want to do is just make sure that your offer is confidential, especially if you write an offer on a property that is in the same office. So, for instance, I um, bring an offer to an agent who's in my office. I make sure that she keeps your offer private from maybe other agents in the office, or that she does not disclose any information she might see, say, if I made a copy of your offer on the printer. It doesn't happen. I'm very careful, but those are things that they want you to know about. Wire fraud, this is super important. We're already 5 minutes in. This one here is really, really important. It's happened to me. It's happened to almost every one of my buyers in the last 2 years, where they get this email that says, send your information and your wire to me, and it's fraud. So always, always call, only use a phone number to call and verify where you're sending the money and talk to that person. Sometimes people call them right when they're at the bank, and then the bank verify. They all just, it's one of the few things that you're gonna have to physically do, this that's not text, not email. We're gonna have to connect you with a real person and make sure where you're sending that money is correct, because if it's not, you don't get it back. It goes away. Okay, let's just jump into the contract. First couple pages, really quick. I used a property that's listed right now. Here is the confirmation of agency. This is this agent. He is representing the seller. You will see me representing the buyer. I just picked up the number for the purchase price. 30 days close of escrow. That just means in 30 days you get keys. Expiration date of offer, we're going to go ahead and leave the default, which is 3 days after all buyer signatures at 5 p.m. So that basically means if you finish that offer on a Wednesday and it goes over on the Wednesday, it's 3 calendar days after the buyer's signature. So that would be what, Saturday by 5? More like Friday, really should count that one day. But either way, that's the default. We tend to make these a little quicker now and say, for instance, when the offer is due, usually I'll give the seller about a day and a half after that offer has been presented for them to respond. Initial deposit amount, that's the 3%. This is the one that everybody's always worried about losing. You won't lose it, and I'll tell you how and why. We'll get into that in a little bit. Today's contract should be written 1 business day. So that means that if your offer is accepted on Wednesday night, you should have it in by the following Thursday night, 1 business day. That's, of course, making sure everybody understands what a business day is, not the weekends. We get accepted on Saturday, not due till Monday. Okay, loan amount is 80%, so that's what 80% of it is. And I keep filling this out, and it keeps not saving it. So I'm going to put this interest rate amount in. Let's save it. And 1% of, or 1 point. These are stopgaps. This is if the market just goes nuts in the mortgage world. This actually says to the seller, look, if my interest rate goes up another percent and they are going to want more than 1 point, we're going to need to talk, because I'm not willing to go much higher than that. Of course, that makes all this much more unaffordable, and maybe it could prevent the pre-qualification from actually being valid at that point. Now, I did work in real estate at a time when we did have some volatile rates, and that was something that we really, really tried to keep track of. Oh, I see what I did. Additional. Nope, don't want that here. Okay, don't worry, when I do your offer, I go over it a bunch of times, but this is an example. Here's the balance of your down payment. That would be 17%. The other 3 up there would make it 20% with your 80, and there's your purchase price. Okay, we're not going to worry about seller credit. We're only going to worry about what this offer really needs to worry about. Verification of down payment and closing costs. You do have to tell the seller where you're getting your money outside of the loan. So you're going to tell them about your loan. That's this here. And then you're going to tell them about that extra 20%. Where's that at? And you're going to tell them how, what, where, and how right here. So attached to the offer. And then here's your loan application. Where are you? Well, you're in the pre-qualification process. You've started everything. Pre-approval means you're completely everything that the lender wants, they have. And then fully underwritten pre-approval means all your information is in with the underwriter. And the underwriter says, yeah, you're good. I don't see that very often. I usually see pre-approvals and pre-qualifications. Now, these are all terms and conditions that can kind of get way down the pike because we're really only worried about money and if we can get it at the beginning of the offer. But these are all the details you need to think about. So we have final verification of condition. That means after after you decided the property is fine, everything's great, and your loan is good, the appraisal is good, you're set to go. Then you have basically all you do at that point is have time to get ready to close. And so here you're just saying 5 days before that close of escrow date, I'm going to come take a look at the property. Assignment request, we're not going to worry about that. It doesn't apply here. Loan contingency. Now remember there's contingency. So these are conditions, or I like to call them but or ifs. This is, hey, I am going to buy your property once I satisfy myself with all these items right here. This is contingencies. You'll see down here, it gets blocked out here with possession. So I get my loan 17 days after I get it, and I get full approval from my lender. I'm going to remove that, and that contingency is removed. I'm going to say 14 days after acceptance, I'm going to buy it. That's a contingency I'm removing as long, of course, as it appraises. We'll talk about this other part here later. Investigation of property. So here, I usually go 5 days these days only because the sellers typically now get all the information to the buyer way before they even look at offers. So that would be home inspection, termite inspection, any other inspections, sewer lateral. We'll talk about that in just a second. And that's just saying after the 5 days, I'm going to remove that. So that's going to be the first one. Then I'm going to get that appraisal out of the way. This will happen probably at the same time. You won't really notice it happening. But maybe the roof is worn and you want to get a roof inspection and that was not provided. We scramble, but I always get it done in that time frame. Any other questions you have about the property, I work really hard to get those questions answered within that time frame. If I just can't get it, I ask for a little bit more time. But when I tell them why, I usually get it. Okay. Review of all the seller documents, the preliminary title report. That's basically saying that the seller has the right to sell it, and any other liens and anything else we might find actually that's recorded against the property would be here. I'm not going to worry about these. We don't have time. Time of possession, that just means after it records. That means after it's legally yours, the bank has given the title company the money, the seller has the money, everybody's happy, and at that time, you get keys. Not gonna worry about the other ones. Okay, now this is the time for when seller needs to do some stuff for you. Basically, the seller needs to deliver documents. Now we said 5 for your physical inspection, or basically reviewing the seller documents. So hey, we're just going to give them 3 days to finish up on anything else that they didn't get us. Sign and return escrow holder provisions instructions. This is kind of new, so they're required to do this, but right now we're kind of holding their feet to the fire on this. I usually leave it blank, but that would be the listings agent's duty to kind of get them to step up. Sometimes if I have a seller not signing the paperwork, the title company will call me and I'll get it done. Don't have to worry about that. In this house, it would have needed a smoke alarm, a carbon monoxide detector, and water heater bracing. We're telling them, hey, after we're all good and in contract, you got to get that done. Evidence of representative authority, that's basically just stating that within 3 days, you got to prove you can actually sell it. So if it's in a trust, it's a family member, power of attorney, any of that needs to be provided. Here's items to be included. I guesstimated on stuff that was still at the house. And then bathroom mirror is always on there. It's a default. Okay. This is who pays for things. So a natural hazard disclosure report is required by law. Seller needs to pay. It is required that the seller actually order it. But here we can actually change around who pays for it. We also are going to tell them we want an environmental. That's just, for instance, a lot of times you'll find old gas stations or old wells that are just considered like contaminated. We don't have many of those around, but I have seen them. Railroad lines, any of that that's actually recorded with the state, the seller may not know. So this general report here actually provides that information, and then the seller can pass it on to you. We're telling the seller that they have to provide the smoke alarm, carbon monoxide detector, and water heater bracing. And then here for Santa Cruz City and County, right now, we have 2 point of sale inspections and reports. We have a low flow water device certification, which basically says the toilets are low flow and the shower heads are low flow. Here we have the report, and that would be also on the sewer lateral. That's where the actual sewer line comes out to the main, and it connects there, and sometimes it's failing. So that report will actually show what's going on there, and then here is what's going to be done about it. Escrow and title fees are paid half by each person. I'm running out of time to explain all this. But basically, these are customary fees, and then the county transfer tax is basically a sales tax. Let's just run down here really quick because I'm trying to be short. Here's all the definitions of those boxes and what they mean, and just some other stuff to understand about them. You would get this when you get the contract. You would get a copy. You would get a copy even before you signed it, and you can go through all of this. But I'm trying to go quick. I'm going to run all the way down here because this is the most important part right here, liquidated damages. This is where everybody worries. So you did, in this instance, give them $25,000. You wired it in. You got to the finish line. You got to the day before closing, and you didn't want to buy that house. You've decided you're going to go build yurts in Montana. Well, here's what happens in this instance. You can lose the deposit unless the seller negotiates with you. They have the right to it because you've removed all your conditions, and you're basically going to be relinquishing 3% of the purchase price because you did not perform. I've only seen it happen twice in my career, never with me, and a couple of them were fairly tragic situations, and the seller didn't really negotiate much. They were upset they had to be off the market for that long, and still they wanted their money. So mediation is just, they ask you to go to mediation, which is basically you go to mediators. If that doesn't work, then you go to arbitration. If this doesn't work either, then you go to court. Again, have not had it happen in my career. Only one was we went through mediation, and we did get it settled. I hope I didn't say meditation. Lastly, just right here is buyer's investigation. These are all the things I want to remind you to think about and look at. And then reminding you that be careful who you give your information to. You won't give much private information to me, but there's a lot of people involved, lenders and all sorts that may have information about you. And that's going to do it. I don't want to go any further, but of course, if you have questions, reach out and I will give you an individual tutorial. All right, talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.